Late at night, the NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., was almost silent. The long, neon-lit hallways echoed only with the footsteps of a few security guards on patrol. On the top floor of the building, where the Astronomical Research Center was located, a room was still lit. In that room, among giant screens and data tables filled with numbers, Dr. Selene Arkwright stood alone facing the universe. Selene stood out not only for her sharp intellect but also for her distinctive appearance. Her long, silver hair fell to her shoulders, shimmering as if reflecting the light from billions of distant stars. Many people thought her hair was the result of illness or premature aging, but in fact it was her natural color since childhood. For those who worked with Selene, her silver hair was not just a physical mark but also a symbol, a woman associated with the mysteries of the universe. Her research room was a far cry from the usual sterile scientific offices. On the walls hung Hubble magnified images of giant nebulae, the purple, blue, and red bands like surreal paintings of nature. The desk was cluttered with books, reports, and star maps that stretched to the edge. On the shelf, an ancient bronze planetarium sat next to a 3D model of the solar system, like a combination of past and present. Tonight, Selene was focused on the Carina Nebula, a region of space some 7,000 light-years from Earth. Carina has long been considered by astronomers to be the cradle of giant stars. Among them was Eta Carinae, a giant binary star system that was about to explode into a supernova. But what fascinated Selene was not just its beauty, but the spectral data she had just received. On the screen, the bands of light from Carina were displayed as a graph. The light waves ran in layers, alternating between peaks and valleys. Selene frowned, zooming in on a segment of the data. There was a strange, regular rhythm, not unlike the natural chaos of gas and dust in space. It was like a signal. "No way," she muttered, moving her mouse to filter out the noise. The system compared the data with telescopes in Chile and Hawaii. The results were identical. Not a technical error. Not a coincidence. Selene leaned back in her chair, her eyes shining. Since she was a child, she had spent hours staring at the sky through her father's old telescope. "The stars are never silent," he used to say. "They always whisper something. You just have to learn to listen." And tonight, Selene felt as if the stars were whispering to her. She bent over the table and opened the old leather notebook. In the pale blue glow of the screen, she jotted down each wave, each repeating sequence of numbers. The data looked like a giant heartbeat of the universe. And her intuition told her, this was no coincidence. The door to the room suddenly opened slightly. Marcus, a young engineer in charge of data processing, walked in holding a hot cup of coffee. "Selene, you're still here." "It's my turn tonight," he said, a little surprised but not surprised. Everyone knew Selene often stayed up all night to research. She didn't turn her head, just gestured. "Come here. Look at this." Marcus put down his coffee cup and leaned closer to the screen. After only a few seconds, his eyes widened. "This doesn't look like a natural signal." Selene nodded. "I think so too. It's repetitive. Has a rhythm. Like someone is tapping into the void." Marcus lowered his voice, whispering as if afraid the universe itself would hear. "You mean, an artificial signal?" Selene smiled slightly, her eyes still glued to the screen. "I'm not so quick to jump to conclusions. But the data doesn't lie. The question is, if this is really a signal, it's coming from Carina, 7,000 light-years away. What do you think could send a stable signal at that distance?" Marcus was silent. In the room, only the hum of the server could be heard. Outside, the distant stars were still shining, cold but also enchanting. Selene gently closed her notebook, her eyes pensive. She knew that this discovery, if made public, would cause a fierce controversy. But at the same time, her intuition told her that she had just touched on a secret that perhaps NASA, or even humanity, was not ready to face. Her silver hair fell down, reflecting the light from the screen as if it were one with the distant galaxy. In that moment, Selene clearly felt that her life would no longer be peaceful. The following morning, The glass-walled conference room on the 12th floor of NASA headquarters buzzed with restless conversation. Senior researchers, project directors, and analysts gathered around a long oval table. Screens at the far end displayed the familiar swirl of the Carina Nebula, its gaseous plumes frozen in dazzling color. Selene stood near the display, clutching her tablet. The silver strands of her hair caught the fluorescent light, shimmering like threads of starlight. She had barely slept. The patterns from the night before replayed in her mind over and over. They weren't random, she knew it. They were deliberate. Dr. Arkwright, the director of astrophysics, Dr. Leonard Cross, spoke first. His voice carried the kind of weight that came with decades of tenure and authority. You requested this urgent session. Show us what was so pressing. Selene inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Last night, while analyzing spectrographic data from Carina, I detected a repeating sequence. First it looked like interference. But after cross-checking with data from Chile and Hawaii, the pattern remained consistent. It isn't noise. It's structured. Ordered. A murmur ran through the room. Marcus, seated 2 chairs down, leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the same excitement he had felt the night before. Selene tapped her tablet, and the graphs appeared on the screen, jagged peaks forming a rhythm, repeating with uncanny precision. You'll notice the intervals, Selene explained. They echo the ratios we find in harmonic oscillations. Mathematics embedded in the very light itself. It's not chaotic. It's intentional. Intentional. Dr. Cross repeated, his brow furrowing. Are you implying what I think you're implying? Selene chose her words carefully. I'm saying this pattern resembles a signal. Possibly a message. For a moment silence. Then laughter, short, sharp, dismissive, from one of the older scientists at the end of the table. With respect, Dr. Arkwright, we've seen these supposed signals before. Cosmic background noise can play tricks on eager minds. Pulsars, quasars. Remember the little green men fiasco? Every generation wants to find aliens in the static. Others chuckled in agreement. The tension in Selene's chest tightened. This isn't the same, she insisted. The periodicity doesn't match natural pulsars. Too precise. Look here, she pointed at the overlay. The ratios form prime numbers. Prime numbers don't occur naturally in emission spectra. They're mathematical fingerprints. Marcus nodded quickly. She's right. I ran the numbers myself. It's unlike anything in our catalog. But Dr. Cross raised a hand, silencing him. Enough speculation. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What you've presented, Dr. Arkwright, could be calibration error or cross-contamination of datasets. Until proven otherwise, that's what it remains. Selene's pulse raced. With respect, sir, dismissing it without deeper analysis is reckless. If this is what I believe it is, we may have stumbled upon the first verified artificial signal from beyond our solar system. Cross's eyes hardened. And if you're wrong, we waste precious resources chasing ghosts while the Artemis expansion project is behind schedule. Our funding depends on results the public can understand. Lunar mining, Mars colonization, planetary defense. Not wild claims of messages from the stars. His words hit like a blow. Selene felt the shift in the room. The subtle withdrawal of support, the wary glances exchanged. Even Marcus looked uncertain now, caught between loyalty and the gravity of authority. Another scientist chimed in, her tone clipped. Perhaps Dr. Arkwright has been overworked. Long nights staring at data can influence interpretation. We all know she's brilliant, but brilliance can blur into obsession. A ripple of agreement passed through the table. The laughter earlier had turned into something sharper. Suspicion, condescension. Selene clenched her fists at her sides. I'm not obsessed. I'm doing my job. If science teaches us anything, it's to follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable. What if we're ignoring the single most important discovery in human history because it doesn't fit into a budget report? The room went quiet again, But this time the silence was cold, weighted. Dr. Cross leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I'll authorize a limited review. No more than a week. If no conclusive anomaly is found, we close the matter permanently. Meanwhile, Dr. Arkwright, I suggest you take some time off. Clear your mind." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning wrapped in polite language. Selene felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to argue, to shout, to shake them into seeing what she saw, but she also knew the politics at play. Cross had allies in every division. Pushing harder now would brand her as unstable, and once that label stuck, her career would be over. Marcus caught her eye, offering the faintest nod of encouragement. But it wasn't enough to ease the knot in her chest. Selene gathered her tablet, her movements deliberate, controlled. "Very well," she said, her voice calm despite the storm inside. "I'll comply." As she left the room, she could still feel their eyes on her back, some pitying, some mocking, a few perhaps curious. But she knew what she had seen. She knew the stars didn't lie. Out in the hallway, away from the murmurs and dismissive smiles, Selene pressed her palms against the cool glass of the window overlooking the city. The morning sun was rising, but her thoughts were still light years away, trapped in the pulsing rhythm of Carina's strange song. And though they doubted her, ridiculed her, and sought to silence her, Selene whispered to herself with quiet certainty, "It's real. And I will prove it." 2 days later, Selene sat in her office, surrounded by the silent hum of machines. The glow of data screens bathed her face in cold light. She hadn't gone home since the meeting. Every time she closed her eyes, the rhythmic pulse of the Carina signal returned, louder, clearer, more insistent. Her door slid open without warning. Dr. Leonard Cross stepped inside, followed by 2 administrators in dark suits. Their presence was enough to tell her this wasn't a casual visit. "Dr. Arkwright," Cross began, his voice measured. "We need to talk." Selene rose to her feet. "Of course. Is this about the review?" Cross ignored her question and walked slowly around her office, glancing at the stacks of papers, the star maps pinned to the walls, the glowing sequences on her monitors. He tapped a finger against one of the charts. "Still chasing this?" "It isn't a chase," Selene said firmly. "It's data. Data that doesn't fit any known natural model." The administrator to Cross's left, a tall man with sharp features, spoke for the first time. "Dr. Arkwright, let's be clear. NASA operates under federal funding. Our mandate is to produce tangible progress: lunar infrastructure, asteroid resource surveys, planetary defense. What you're pursuing may be interesting, but it doesn't align with current priorities." Selene felt her pulse quicken. So truth doesn't align with priorities. Cross's eyes narrowed. "Enough. You're straying from the mission. I've already reassigned a portion of your resources to the Artemis expansion project. Effective immediately, all data concerning Carina is restricted. You no longer have clearance to access those files." The words struck like ice. Selene stared at him. "You can't do that. Those signals." "I can," Cross interrupted sharply. "And I have. For the good of this institution. We cannot afford to indulge fringe theories that threaten credibility. Do you understand?" Silence pressed down on the room. Selene's hands curled into fists. She thought of her father's voice, of his insistence that the stars carried stories waiting to be uncovered. If she let this go now, the message hidden in Carina might be lost forever. "I understand," she said finally, her tone flat. But inside defiance burned. The administrators exchanged satisfied looks. Cross, however, lingered, studying her. "Take a few weeks off, Selene. Get some rest. We need your brilliance focused where it matters." When they left, the door sliding shut behind them, the office felt smaller, suffocating. Selene sank back into her chair, trembling with frustration. Moments later, Marcus slipped in, eyes wide. "I just heard. They cut you off." Selene nodded grimly. "They locked me out of the Carina files." My credentials won't even open the archives. That's insane, Marcus whispered. The pattern is real. I saw it. Why would they bury it? Selene looked at him, her eyes stormy. Because it threatens control. If the world learned we've intercepted a signal, if that's what it is, who would hold the narrative? Governments, corporations, or the people who discovered it? Cross and his allies don't want uncertainty. They want predictable funding and political stability. Marcus swallowed hard. So what now? Do we just stop? Selene turned back to her darkened screen. I won't stop. I've already saved copies of the raw data. Hidden backups they don't know about. His eyes widened. Selene, if they find out. They won't, she cut him off, though her voice wavered slightly. She knew the risks. Tampering with classified data could end her career, maybe worse. But surrendering meant betraying the very essence of science. The rest of the day crawled by. Colleagues avoided her gaze in the corridors. Some whispered behind closed doors. The subtle shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. She had become a liability, a warning of what happened to those who defied authority. Late that evening, Selene stood alone in the observation dome. Through the transparent glass, the night sky stretched infinite and merciless. She traced the faint outline of Carina, knowing that light had traveled 7,000 years to reach her eyes. Somewhere out there, across unimaginable distance, a message pulsed in silence, and she was being told to ignore it. Her reflection stared back at her. Pale skin, silver hair glowing faintly in the dim light, eyes ringed with exhaustion but burning with resolve. She pressed a hand against the glass. They want obedience, she whispered to the empty room. But the stars don't bow to budgets or politics. For a long time she stood there, listening to the silence of space, feeling both terribly small and terrifyingly responsible. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous. But she also knew, with an unshakable certainty, that she could not walk away. The pulse of Carina still echoed in her mind. Steady, patient, eternal. And Selene vowed to follow it, no matter the cost. The following nights blurred together in secret. Selene no longer worked from her office at NASA. Too many eyes, too many whispers. But from a small rented loft a few blocks away, a place with nothing more than a desk, a battered laptop, and blackout curtains. She had hidden the raw Carina data on an encrypted drive before her clearance was revoked. Every evening she sat hunched over her screens, silver hair falling across her face, translating light into numbers, numbers into patterns. It was exhausting work, but exhilarating too. The deeper she went, the more she was convinced. This wasn't chaos. It was structure. The data streams looked like music. Bursts of intensity followed by silence, then another burst, repeating in cycles. She filtered it through algorithms, discarding background noise, until one undeniable truth revealed itself. Prime numbers. The sequence pulsed in sets of primes. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Marching upward in perfect order. Her breath caught the first time she saw it clearly. No natural process produced such a clean progression. Prime numbers were universal markers, the kind of sign any intelligent civilization might use to declare, "We are here. We know mathematics. We want to be understood." But there was more. Selene adjusted the filters again, layering time intervals against spectral variations. The pattern shifted, unfolded. It was no longer just a line of numbers. It was geometry. On her screen, dots began to arrange themselves into coordinates. At first it looked abstract, but as she rotated the model in 3 dimensions, her heart lurched. Map. The pulses corresponded to relative positions of stars within Carina. Not random stars, but a specific alignment, one that could serve as a navigational chart. And at the center of that chart, highlighted by repeated emphasis in the data, was a region of space unremarkable to most astronomers. A dust cloud, faint and overlooked. Selene leaned closer, whispering to herself, "You've been hiding in plain sight." The implications raced through her mind. This wasn't just a greeting. It was an invitation or a warning. Something or someone wanted the signal to point to that location. Her excitement was pierced by a sudden noise. A soft creak on the floorboards behind her. Selene spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. Just the empty loft, shadows stretching under the dim lamp. She exhaled shakily, reminding herself she was tired, her nerves raw from lack of sleep. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. The next morning, she met Marcus in a quiet cafe far from the NASA campus. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before sitting down. "You shouldn't have called me," he muttered. "They're monitoring everything now. Emails, badge scans. Cross is convinced you're still digging." Selene slid a flash drive across the table. "Because I am. Marcus, it's real. Prime numbers, coordinates, it's a map. Someone wanted us to see this." He hesitated, staring at the small object between them as if it were dangerous. "Do you hear yourself? If you're right, this changes everything. But if they find out you're still working the data, they'll bury it forever," she cut in. "Don't you see? That's why they silenced me. Not because they don't believe me, but because they do." Marcus's eyes widened. "Selene, I need you," she pressed. "You still have access. Help me cross-check. Quietly. No one else can know." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, reluctantly, he pocketed the drive. "I'll see what I can do. But if we get caught..." "We won't," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Back in her loft that evening, Selene studied the map again. The faint dust cloud at the center nagged at her. She dug through archived surveys, old radio scans. Very little had been published. To most, it was just another patch of darkness. But the signal insisted otherwise. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. In the silence, she imagined the signal as a voice, ancient and patient, whispering across 7,000 years of space. A civilization lost or waiting. A warning encoded in starlight. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from an unknown number. "Stop. You are not the first to see this. You will not be the last. For your own safety, walk away." Selene's blood ran cold. Her fingers trembled as she set the phone down. She looked back at the map glowing on her screen, her silver hair gleaming in its light. Walk away. Impossible. The stars had spoken and she was listening. But deep inside she knew, the more she uncovered, the more dangerous her path would become. And somewhere, someone already knew she had gone too far. The message on her phone wouldn't leave her mind. "Stop. You are not the first to see this. You will not be the last. For your own safety, walk away." Selene read it again and again, her chest tight. Whoever had sent it knew about her research, knew enough to reference it directly. That alone chilled her more than the words themselves. For hours she sat in the loft, staring at her laptop, the map of Carina still glowing faintly. Each pulse, each sequence of primes, felt more urgent now, like a heartbeat racing in her ears. Someone else had been here before her. Someone who had either vanished or been silenced. By morning, she couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. Using an encrypted forum frequented by astronomers and physicists, Selene posted a coded query. Innocuous on the surface, but laced with references only someone familiar with her findings would notice. She didn't expect a reply. But one came within the hour. "Meet me. Tonight. Independence Square. 10 p.m. You'll know who I am." Her stomach tightened. Every rational part of her screamed it was a trap. Yet curiosity, and something deeper, an almost gravitational pull, drove her forward. The night was damp, the city shrouded in drizzle. Selene pulled her coat tighter, hood shadowing her silver hair as she walked into the square. Tourists were gone, shops closed, only the faint glow of street lamps illuminating the wet cobblestones. At first she thought no one had come. Then a figure emerged from the shadows near the fountain. A man in his 60s, thin. His shoulders stooped but his eyes sharp even in the dim light. "You came," he said, voice low and rough. "Who are you?" Selene demanded, every muscle taut. He gave a tired smile. Someone who made the same mistake you're making now. My name doesn't matter. Let's just say I was where you are. 20 years ago. Selene's heart pounded. You worked for NASA. Once. Before I asked the wrong questions. His gaze flicked around the square, wary of watchers. You think you've found something new in Carina? Signal. A map. Her breath caught. How do you know that? Because I saw it too. Not in Carina but elsewhere. Kept off the books. Locked away in classified files. Every few decades, someone stumbles across traces. And every time the same thing happens. Denial, ridicule, then removal. Quiet, clean, final. Selene felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. Removal. The man nodded grimly. Colleagues who wouldn't let go lost funding, lost reputations. Some simply disappeared. Accidents, suicides, sudden illnesses. Convenient explanations. NASA's official stance is that no signal has ever been verified. And they intend to keep it that way. But why? She pressed, anger rising in her voice. If there's proof of intelligent life, this is the greatest discovery in human history. Why bury it? His eyes, full of old regret, met hers. Because proof brings panic, power, control. Governments fear what they cannot manage. Corporations fear what they cannot own. The public, they would demand answers no one is ready to give. So the safest path for those in charge is silence. Selene clenched her fists. So we're meant to live blind. Pretend the universe is empty just because it's convenient. That's exactly what they want. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. But I can tell you this, the signal you found. It's stronger than what I ever saw. And if you keep going, they will come for you. They already know you've gone too far. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Then why warn me? The man hesitated, his expression weary. Because I didn't listen when someone tried to warn me. And I've lived in the shadows ever since, watching colleagues die while I kept silent. I won't carry that guilt again. You still have a chance to walk away. Selene shook her head slowly, determination burning beneath the fear. I can't. You don't understand, this signal isn't just noise. It's precise, deliberate. Points to something specific, something hidden. If I stop now, it will vanish into another locked file and humanity will lose it forever. His shoulders sagged. Then you've chosen your path. He pressed a folded slip of paper into her hand. Coordinates. An old archive facility outside the city. If anything survived from my time, it will be there. But be careful. They watch everything. Before she could respond, he turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving her alone in the drizzle, the paper crumpled in her palm. Selene stood frozen for a long time, the city quiet around her. Her breath came fast, visible in the cold air. Not the first, not the last. She looked down at the slip, the ink already smudging from the rain. It was a choice. Safety or truth. She knew which one she would make. The stars had given her a message. And no warning, no threat could silence it. The following morning, Selene returned to NASA headquarters, her badge still granting her entry despite Cross's warning. As she stepped through the revolving doors, a strange stillness fell over her. Conversations hushed as she passed. Colleagues who once smiled politely now turned away, whispering behind their hands. Her office door was ajar. She was certain she'd locked it the night before. Selene paused, scanning the hallway. No one lingered nearby. Cautiously, she pushed the door open. Everything inside appeared normal. Her desk stacked with reports, her star charts pinned neatly to the walls, her computer humming softly. But something in the air felt different. She sat at her desk and moved her mouse. The login screen blinked at her, but when she typed her password, the screen flashed red. Access denied. Credentials revoked. Her stomach tightened. Cross hadn't just restricted her to Carina files. He'd cut her off entirely. She turned, startled, as Marcus slipped inside. He shut the door quickly, eyes darting nervously. They've locked you out completely. he said in a hushed voice. IT flagged your account. They said you tried to access restricted data. Selene frowned. I haven't. Not from here. Marcus lowered his voice further. Then someone's framing you. They're building a case. Selene's mind raced. She thought of the stranger's warning, of the paper slip burning a hole in her pocket. She was already on their radar. She pulled Marcus closer. Listen to me. They planted something in my system. You need to check the logs quietly. If they're monitoring my office, I need to know. Marcus nodded reluctantly. I'll try. But if they catch me, they won't, she insisted, though her voice trembled. That afternoon, she attended a staff briefing in the main auditorium. Rows of employees filled the seats, their attention fixed on the giant screen displaying updates on the Artemis project. But Selene barely heard a word. Her eyes kept drifting to the upper balcony, where two men in suits she didn't recognize stood watching. Not the presentation but the audience. Watching her. Her pulse quickened. She leaned toward Marcus. Do you see them? He glanced up, then quickly away. Don't look too long. They're from security. Cross must have called them in. Security. At NASA, that meant federal oversight. Not just protecting the building but ensuring compliance. People who asked the wrong questions ended up in interrogation rooms, their careers dismantled piece by piece. When the meeting ended, Selene slipped out the side door, her steps fast but controlled. She could feel their eyes on her back, tracking every move. Back in her loft that night, Selene paced restlessly. Her laptop glowed with the Carina data she still possessed, hidden from NASA's servers. But now the danger felt immediate, pressing. She was no longer just a scientist pursuing truth. She was prey. A knock at the door froze her. Her breath caught. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly she approached. Who is it? She called. It's me, Marcus's voice whispered. Relief flooded her. She opened the door quickly, ushering him inside. He looked pale, sweat beading on his forehead. You were right, he said, pulling a small device from his pocket. Your office has been bugged. I found a transmitter under your desk. They've been recording everything. Every conversation, every keystroke. Selene's blood ran cold. How long? At least a week. Maybe longer. She staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. So they know. About the signal. About the map. Marcus shook his head. Not the full extent, I don't think. But they know you're hiding something. That's why they're tightening the net. She sank into her chair, silver hair spilling over her shoulders. They'll stop at nothing, she whispered. If they buried signals before, they'll do it again. And anyone who resists. Marcus leaned closer, urgency in his eyes. Then we can't let them bury it. You still have the data, don't you? Copies they don't know about. Selene hesitated, then nodded. Good, Marcus said. But you can't keep working from here. They're watching every step. You need allies, people outside the system. Selene thought of the old man in the square. His haunted eyes. He had survived barely by disappearing. Could she do the same? Or was she already too deep? She stood, crossing to the window. The city lights stretched endlessly below, but her gaze lifted higher, to the faint smudge of stars visible through the haze. Somewhere out there, Carina pulsed, patient and relentless. They think surveillance and threats will silence me, she murmured. But the stars don't bow to authority. And neither will I. Behind her, Marcus watched anxiously. Then you'd better prepare. Because from now on, Selene, every move you make will be under their eyes. Selene's reflection in the glass met her own gaze, silver hair glowing in the neon light. Fear pressed in around her, but so did resolve. If they were watching, then she would play the part they expected. Obedient, subdued. While in secret, she followed the trail the signal had laid out. The game had changed. She was no longer just seeking answers in the stars. She was fighting to survive.
Part 2 is still on the channel. Please watch and follow.